So, good morning. Today, over 3 billion people carry smartphones in their pockets. Computers are steadily getting smaller, cheaper, and more capable. Countless industries have been reformed by the computer. There are many exciting things happening in the computer world today. We're able to see driverless cars. We have the entire world's knowledge at our fingertips. And virtual and augmented reality applications take us to other worlds or enhance our current one. And artificial intelligence is already all around us. And it's quite easy to get the idea that the current state of the computer world is the climax of our great progress. But today I want to start with a different story, a story about my father. My father was a private pilot, and when I was growing up, his stories about flying were a frequent topic at our dinner table. There's one story I remember quite vividly. My father grew up in a farmhouse in the countryside of Argentina. And in those days, ambulances were not readily available. So a young group of boys and men flew around in their small airplanes, collecting casualties to bring to their nearest hospitals. And one night they got a radio call from a small town in the jungle, only accessible by air, to say there had been an accident. My father was only 18 years old at that time, so his mother strictly forbade him from flying, especially at night. But on this night, after receiving a call on his walkie-talkie, my father escaped through his bedroom window, cycled to the airport, and flew to that small town to collect the injured. My father's stories affected me and my brother on a deep level. We both started drawing airplanes, building airplane models, flying them, watching movies, documentaries, and enjoying nerd talks on aviation. My brother even tried to become a fighter pilot for the military. Aviation was in my blood, and it was inevitable I would one day want to be a pilot myself. After 10 years of saving and while watching friends of mine going on world trips, I stuck to my decision to learn to fly. I hope you're able to see why I'm personally so affected by airplanes. You see, I find the evolution of airplanes so interesting. Before airplanes, continents such as America were traversable only once or twice in a normal person's life. Immigrants from Europe, Africa, or Asia knew they would never return to the place they left behind. But then with air travel, the world was made smaller and the nature of work changed. And computers followed a similar evolution. The ENIAC was the first general-purpose computer. It was a huge machine costing about $500,000 at that time, weighing almost 30 tons and needing several people attending to it at all times to function. Programmers debug problem by crawling inside to find bad joints and bad tubes in a massive structure. And today our computers and devices make the world smaller and faster, changing the nature of work and allowing us to stay in contact with our loved ones all around the globe. So before looking at the evolution of airplanes and computers in detail, it is important to make two things clear. First, we must make a distinction between a technology and a medium. A technology is a physical apparatus, and a medium is a use to which a physical apparatus is put. A technology becomes a medium when it is given a place in our society and culture. In other words, a technology is just a tool we can play with. But a new medium changes everything. The airplane as a technology did not introduce transportation or travel into human society. But the airplane as a medium accelerated the rate of transportation, creating new kinds of work and leisure. The second point I want to make is we shape our tools and our tools shape us. The person who said this was Marshall McLuhan. While being a quite controversial academic figure, McLuhan's work is viewed as one of the cornerstones of the study of media theory. The saying actually comes from this book, Understanding Media, which came out in 1964. McLuhan proclaimed that it is the medium itself and not the content that impacts our society and culture. He said each new medium, whether it's air travel, the car, radio, TV, telephone, or even computers, create a new environment for people to act in. All media act as extensions of our human capabilities, and when you introduce a medium into society, it affects our outlook and attitudes, our feelings about how we relate to the world. I want to show you a short video with some of his words to make this point more clear.
All media are extensions of some human faculty, mental or physical. The wheel is an extension of the foot. The book is an extension of the eye. Clothing is an extension of the skin. Electric circuitry is an extension of the central nervous system. The extension of any one sense displaces the other senses and alters the way we think, the way we see the world and ourselves. When these changes are made, men change.
Now let's have a look at the amazing technological progress we made both in air travel and computers. This is one of the most amazing and successful airplanes ever built. The Boeing 747 is nicknamed the Jumbo Jet or Queen of the Skies. And even if you're not an aviation expert, the 747 is easy to tell apart because of her size and her distinctive hump. Both the 747 as well as her immediate predecessor, the 707, heralded the era of modern intercontinental mass transportation. Their popularity led to rapid developments in airport terminals, baggage handling, and air transport infrastructure. They truly paved the way for jetliners to become what they are today. And the 747 is not only an impressive result of an intensive engineering design process, but also the spirit of its era, where a time when belief in progress, including access to air travel, was a phenomenal force. As such, there are so many wonderful stories about this plane. It was 2.5 times bigger than the largest passenger jet ever built at that time. They had to build a special factory to assemble it. And they were still building the factory as the first planes came off the line. My favorite fact about the 747, however, is that it was meant to be a stopgap. Boeing expected to sell a couple of hundred units or so, and only serve the airlines until planes of a supersonic era entered the service in the 1970s, at which point it would find more use as a container-carrying freighter. The famous hump on the front of the 747 was put there specifically to make it easier to load freight. This was not a plane with a glamorous future. All the top engineers and ambitious newcomers had ensured they were assigned to Boeing's prestige project, the Boeing 2707 SST, an airplane designed for supersonic transport. The 2707 was intended to fly at 3 times the speed of sound, about 2,900 kilometers an hour. It had swing wings, and it was the first ever wide-body design. And everyone believed that supersonic transport was the future of jet travel. This Pan Am advertisement from the period showcases these supersonic planes of tomorrow. But it wasn't just Boeing working to build a supersonic transport. The Europeans were developing the Concorde. And the Soviet Union was hard at work on their own version, the Tupolev 144. And around the same time, Ivan Sutherland created Sketchpad. Sketchpad is considered to be the ancestor of modern computer-aided design programs, as well as a major breakthrough in the development of computer graphics in general. It was the first graphical object-oriented system based entirely on drawings and constraints given by the user. Here you will see a few lines being drawn and then defined to be perpendicular. And without knowing anything about the intent of the user, Sketchpad automatically translates the constraints into a reusable result. Each drawing may then be used as a master and be included in other drawings. And while Ivan Sutherland was still tinkering with his system, the military was especially interested in supersonic planes that could either escape the enemy's anti-air defense or drop an atomic bomb and escape quickly, leaving only dust behind. The supersonic transport airplanes were, as it happens, only a watered-down version of what the military was planning and prototyping. Beginning with Chuck Yeager's X-1 and his first supersonic flight in 1947, some crazy designs inhabited our skies. This is the XB-70 Valkyrie, a strategic supersonic bomber which was able to reach speeds of over 3,200 kilometers an hour. Or the SR-71 Blackbird, which still holds all the speed records. Being able to fly at over 3 times the speed of sound, its engineers had to come up with some creative solutions. For example, it was leaking gasoline when standing on the ground and would only stop leaking at those speeds due to the high temperature. And just a few years later, Doug Engelbart, one of the fathers of personal computing, presented his vision of augmenting human intellect with the help of computers. Using technology to improve human capabilities, he wanted to boost our collective intelligence. But he saw this only as a starting point of using tool-augmented behavior and habits to further refine our tools in a continual co-evolution. In 1968, he showcased the prototype for his vision, the NLS, also known as the mother of all demos. It was given this nickname as it introduced so many concepts we still use today: the computer mouse, Windows, graphics, video conferencing, word processing, hypertext, revision control, or a collaborative real-time editor. And then there was spaceflight. A year after Engelbart's presentation, the Americans landed on the moon, while the Russians were starting to populate space. Convenient travel to the moon felt possible and imminent at that time. Pan Am, for example, had already started taking reservation requests to fly to the moon. And just a few years later, Alan Kay, one of Xerox PARC's prodigies, brought up a prototype for a collaborative platform for children, the Dynabook. It was a highly interactive, low-cost, battery-powered, portable computer with a touchscreen and graphics, able to access and share information over the network. He presented a detailed vision for the touchscreen tablet decades before it was practical. Though much more than a tablet, it was envisioned as a dynamic medium you could play and interact with. And it goes on. A decade later, designers were still going crazy, inventing unconventional airplanes like the F-117 Nighthawk, the first stealth plane. It's no wonder these times in history feature so many UFO reports. It was a glorious era of aviation. Let's have a look at the most advanced passenger airplane of today's age, the Boeing 787. It features 1,000-fold improvements in every technological dimension. It's just mind-boggling. But if you aren't an aviation nerd like me, you'd be hard-pressed to tell it apart from the predecessor of the 747, the 707, that was first built in 1958. And the 707 flew even faster at 960 kilometers an hour. Of course, the technologies used in a 787 are much more advanced. But if you take a step back, the differences are quite minor. especially if you compare them to the wild dreams we had. You see, the next generation of technology was not just a dream. It was already in the prototyping stage. But then it all just stopped. Few people needed to cross an ocean in 3 hours instead of 6 hours. And when asked what they would do with those additional 3 hours, people said they would watch TV. So they put TV sets in the 747. Being able to go anywhere in the world in a day is really good. A couple of $1,000s might be expensive, and those hours might feel cumbersome. But not that expensive when you consider that overnight you can move yourself to virtually any point on Earth. The people designing the supersonic planes of tomorrow became so caught up in the technology that they forgot to ask what role the new medium should play in our society. And then there were matters such as environmental damage, recessions, and money cuts that caught up. The same thing that happened to aviation is happening with computers. Everyone takes the structure of the computer world as God-given, but the computer world deals with arbitrary stuff that all was made up by somebody. Everything you see on your computer, on your smartphone, or any other device was made up by someone. And the computer world is not yet finished. Yet everyone is behaving as though everything was known. At 50 years into the computer revolution, it feels like our moment of greatest progress. This is not true. Today's omnipresent graphical user interface has its roots in Doug Engelbart's ground-shedding research of the mid-60s. The concepts he invented were further developed at Xerox PARC in the 70s, successfully commercialized in the Apple Macintosh in the early 80s, whereupon they essentially froze. 30 years later, despite 1,000-fold improvements along every technological dimension, the concepts behind today's interfaces are almost identical to those in the initial Mac. Our interface is based on metaphors with the familiar non-computer world around us. Files are represented as documents in paper folders that are placed on a desktop. They are deleted by dragging them to the trash. And nevertheless, some metaphors and features work very differently in the real world. Our adaptations constrain and mislead users and limit designers' ability to invent more powerful interface mechanisms. Analogies of the real world go on. Documents get written and read in sheet of paper akin programs. Computer code is drafted line by line, character by character. Almost all of today's representations were designed for the medium of paper. But this limits us to pencil and paper thinking. Sharing and collaborating is utterly hard. We deal with incompatibilities, and although we have Dropbox and Google Docs, collaborating on a document or design or sharing holiday photos gives us grief. And even before we can collaborate, we still need to manually exchange our contact information. I was invited by Anna and Vesna to give this talk. We connected over LinkedIn and email and had quite a conversation going on. Nevertheless, my phone has no idea how I could reach them. Forget about if I move abroad or change my phone number. And then, why do we even need a phone number? If you take a look at our phones, we see a big screen made of glass that you interact with by sliding your fingers along a flat surface. Now, take a real glass of water, and you know how much water is left, first by seeing it, but also by feeling the response of the weight. And almost every object in the world offers this sort of feedback. Our hands have an incredibly rich and expressive repertoire, and we improvise constantly without the slightest thought. And yet, with an entire body at your command, we reduce our interactions with mobile devices to a single finger. I could go on, I really could, but here's the thing. We shape our tools and our tools shape us. It's not as much a technological problem as a lack of perspective. We could easily, one by one, fix the problems I just described and probably many more. Or we could shape something bigger. Like make use of computers to augment our most human capabilities. We have to start thinking about how we want to shape the computer in order to improve our society, our culture. I want to show you a short video by someone you probably know.
I think one of the things that really separates us from the high primates is that we're tool builders. And I read a study that measured the efficiency of locomotion for various species on the planet. The condor used the least energy to move a kilometer. And humans came in with a rather unimpressive showing about a third of the way down the list. It was not too proud of a showing for the crown of creation. So that didn't look so good, but then somebody at Scientific American had the insight to test the efficiency of locomotion for a man on a bicycle. And a man on a bicycle, or a human on a bicycle, blew the condor away, completely off the top of the charts. And that's what a computer is to me. What a computer is to me is, it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with. And it's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds.
I just love Steve Jobs' idea of comparing computers to a bicycle for the mind. There were so many people thinking along these lines, even before Steve Jobs. I showed you 3 projects from our computer history earlier on. You may have wondered why. Ivan Sutherland's Sketchpad seems at first glance like a drawing tool, but it was so much more. It clearly established the first 2 fundamental steps toward an interactive human-computer user experience. And most importantly, his focus was on creating a tool that would fundamentally amplify human capabilities. For example, it was used to plan and build bridges just by adding constraints. Remember, Sketchpad had no idea about gravity or how the strength of beams could be calculated. It computed its solution based on the restrictions given by the user. I was struck by how a computer was able to solve such a difficult problem without knowing which problem it's solving actually is, especially at that time. This is how collaboration between computers and humans should be in a symbiosis between man and machine. Doug Engelbart's vision was a collaborative system of people working together in a shared intellectual space. He saw people collaborating and working together remotely, and his vision of augmenting human intellect was much bigger than his prototype could show. Let's see a bit of his 1968 demo. At one point, we see the face of a remote collaborator, Bill Paxton. And Engelbart and Paxton have a conversation. You've probably seen similar things if you use Skype or Hangouts, but then they start working simultaneously with the document on the screen. Look even closer and you will spot there are 2 individual mouse pointers. Engelbart and Paxton are each controlling their own pointer, and they are working together in a shared intellectual space. When I first saw this blew my mind. It is so far from what we have now. Our computers are designed with a single user assumption, and mirroring a display remotely doesn't magically transform them into collaborative environments. Alan Kay's Dynabook was a collaborative environment for children, a dynamic medium fostering creative thought.
By trying different sizes of things, we realized it should be really thin, should be light, it would have a stylus for drawing on it, wireless network, flat screen display, keyboard, and all that stuff. So this was kind of the thing I used to hold up back then of what computers should be like. It was kind of, if you could have what you wanted, what should it be like? And my image here was the children would be able to play collaboratively games on it, and especially games that they could make themselves. And I wanted for it to be able to do all the things you could do with a book, but be dynamic.
His notion was of being able to play collaboratively, especially games they could make themselves. He envisioned a Dynabook as a dynamic medium which could be easily learned from and extended. And many more great people thought along the same lines. There were tangible user interfaces. The next example is a concept created by Durrell Bishop in 1992 and features small marbles that hold the information you need.
PM.
Hi Simon, it's about 1 o'clock now. I was wondering whether you're going to come to the football. It's the weather's a bit wet and rainy, so I understand if you don't. Other than that, well, yeah, give us a ring if you're in. Okay, bye.
PM.
Hi, Emma, it's Val.
3:30 PM. Hello, a message for Simon Phipps. Your flight is BA6213 at 12:30, Monday the 15th of October. Your job number is BS436215, and the pickup address is 44 Camden Mansions, Kensington Mall. Bye-bye. PM.
Hello Simon, it's George. Could you give us a ring? My phone number is... Talk to you later. See you. Bye.
When I met him last year, he told me this was only the first step. Marbles should hold your information and be usable by all kinds of different devices. Placing a marble next to an audio speaker to hear voice notes, or next to a display to see relevant information in a message, such as maps or invitations. Unfortunately, it never made it out of prototyping stage. And there are exciting projects afoot. This next example is a recent project by a design student from Berlin, Leonard Ziburski, and his project Desktop Neo is a conceptual desktop interface.
Desktop Neo rethinks desktop computing for today's people and tasks with a focus on productivity. It does this in 3 ways. First, it replaces app windows with full-height panels for better multitasking. Second, Neo uses hashtags instead of folders to organize your content better. And third, it tracks your gaze, touch, and voice for faster input than a mouse. Let's have a look. I have 2 app panels open. My email's on the left and a document on the right. Panels use the full height of the screen and are placed next to each other without any overlap. This makes it easy to switch between apps and gives you more space to work with than traditional windows. Looks like I've got a new email from Kelly here. To open the link she sent, I just look at it and then click on my touchpad. Neo tracks where I'm looking so it knows what I want to select. This makes interacting with content much faster than moving your mouse. I can scroll between apps just by swiping on my touchpad. In my document, I want to make a sentence bold, so I select it and then just click and swipe my finger to the bottom right. After a while, it becomes second nature to interact with your content through these quick swipe gestures. I can also use my voice to interact with the content I'm looking at. To add tags to my document, I just say, tag this with blog and desktop. Now, I've got a second article I would like to open. So let's add a new panel by swiping up with 3 fingers. It shows all my relevant content on the left and things like notifications on the right. I just enter #blog into the search field at the top to see all my content with that tag. This includes my documents, apps, mails, websites, messages, friends, events, YouTube videos, and so on. To find my article, I will filter the search to only show documents made in the Pages app. When I select a file, a new card pops up on the right with a preview and some quick action options. I can access all this without ever launching an app. After opening the document, I can still move between apps very quickly for easy multitasking. Thanks to panels, tags, and new input methods, Neo is easy to get into and you'll master its interface in no time. It rethinks desktop computing to help you get work done. This was just a brief look at Neo. To see and read a lot more, check out the website at desktopneo.com.
Now, all of these are just small glimpses into an almost unexplored area, and I could show you many more. As I said before, however, these are not technological problems, but a lack of perspective. We shape our tools, and our tools shape us. I actually lie to you, at least a bit. McLuhan's full quote goes like this: we shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. You see, our technological capability changes much faster than our culture. We first create our technologies, and then they change our society and culture. The lesson is that, even today, we are designing for tomorrow's technology. It would be a shame if going into the future we're still using outdated metaphors, pencil and paper thinking, code in text files, or collaborating manually. When I look at people using digital devices, I see them adjusting to the limitations of the computer. They are sharing instead of collaborating, consuming instead of producing, following instructions instead of experimenting, searching instead of thinking. Have we learned anything from this fertile recent period and from these great ideas and visions? If we don't implement what we learn, it suggests we don't care about how it will change our society for the better or for the worse. It will show we don't care what a medium computer will look like, that we don't care how to make use of computers to augment our most human capabilities. Our history shows if you free yourself from the idea that the current state of the computer world is the climax of our great progress, we can almost magically give rise to new technologies, ideas, and visions that do not only amplify humans, but also produce tremendous wealth for our society. We've ended up focusing too much on technology, on things, on devices, and not enough on ideas, on medium computer? What if a book would not just simply give you facts, but give you the tools to discover ideas yourself, or help you to invent new ones? What if, while reading an article, you could annotate it, challenge the assumptions, and share your insights with the world? What if you could collaborate in the same intellectual space with colleagues? What if your tools would not only allow you to consume content, but to be imaginative creators, to interact with it, to construct knowledge? What if you could collaborate with a computer in a symbiosis between man and machine? The computer world is not yet finished, and many ideas for the collective good are waiting to be discovered. We shape our tools, and thereafter, our tools shape us. Thank you.